We're going to talk about a law that you may not have heard about. It's called Matt's Law, and we're going to talk to the creator of the legislation that was finally passed by the Michigan legislature to protect your children. That's next on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
Don't just reject convention. Drown it out. Introducing the all-new 2013 Lexus LS F-Sport, an entirely new pursuit.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Live, local, and committed to Michigan's future. News Radio 950, WWJ.
We're trying to do it. Thank you. I'm Henry Baskin. I'm your host for this edition of Due Process. Today we're going to talk to Kevin Epling about a law called Matt's Law. And you're going to find it very interesting because it was one that has been a long time in coming, and it was a social problem considered by some to be something that you normally go through as a child goes through school, but that's not the case. And we're going to talk to Kevin Epling. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us something about what you really do aside from talk about Matt's Law.
Yeah, when I go out and I talk about anti-bullying in general, that's really kind of my second life.
Right.
My main life, I've been a video producer for over 25 years, and I work at Michigan State University. I've been there for 20. But so I juggle my time. You know,
Right.
I'm not traveling or doing things for the university. I'm talking about the safety of our kids.
Yeah, and tell me why you got involved in the bullying, anti-bullying process.
Yeah. The easiest way I put this is I got drafted into the war on anti-bullying. Our son Matthew, on the last day of school in 2002, was kind of targeted and assaulted by upperclassmen as a welcome to high school hazing.
What age was Matthew?
Matthew was 14.
14.
Yep. And his last day of 8th grade, you know, he was lured from the house. Around the corner sat 3 upperclassmen who restrained Matt and a friend of his. They smashed eggs on Matt. They poured syrup on him. Basically said, "Welcome to high school, Matt," because he would have been an incoming freshman. And if you tell anybody, you know, there's going to be hell to pay, and high school is going to be hell. We talked with Matt at length about what we wanted to do. We wanted to move forward on charges and those particular things. And unfortunately, this is something that hit Matt much deeper than we saw. Mm-hmm. And 40 days later, Matt took his own life. So that spun our world out of control.
Wow.
And so...
Was Matt an only child?
No. We have his sister, Kristen, who's 20 now.
Well, was there a reason that they lured Matt out of the house and picked on him, bullied him?
Well, I think they were going around getting a lot of kids, and as we kind of had to decipher a lot of the information, we found that these individuals were doing this to other kids. But Matt was actually targeted. That really came down to a case of mistaken identity. They thought he had said something about another family member.
Really?
And it wasn't Matt. But anyways, Matt was kind of an easy target. But I think psychologically, Matt was also one of those leaders in 7th and 8th grade. You know,
really?
So he was kind of one of the kids that wanted to do things for other classmates. So in a bully's mind, if you take out a leader of an incoming class,
right,
you know, to humiliate that person, you retain your power.
You retain or gain power,
perceived power. Right. So, and I think trying to put all the pieces of this puzzle together, which is really what it became, because when Matt was assaulted and then subsequent his death, the 2 investigations were kept totally separate at the time 10 years ago. There wasn't any crossover or investigation, and I think it's very different today. It's very much different, which is good.
Before we talk about today, let me understand so that parents can understand how they can tell objectively that their child is being bullied in school or on the playground or wherever.
Yeah. The things to be looking for, if your child is telling you, you really need to listen if there's something going on. They may become listless, not want to go to school. They may fake things, ailments, stomach ailments. They don't
stomach
want to
is
go.
sore.
Sure, they do that. They'll start skipping school, truancy. You might see grades fail. This is a little bit different in Matt's case because this was kind of a targeted event. It wasn't over a prolonged period of time. So there are different things with bullying, some things that can happen over a long period of time, and that grinds and that builds, on a student's well-being. Right. And I think that's what we've kind of overlooked over the years is how this is really damaging the psychology of our students.
Did he talk to you after the assault?
He called me 5 minutes after. I missed it. I was on my way home. I had a half day, and I missed it by 5 minutes. I probably would have caught him in the act if I had left earlier.
No, after the assault.
Yeah.
He didn't take his life until what?
It was like 40 days later.
Okay, but after the assault, did he talk to you?
Oh, yeah. We talked with him at length about how he felt, about what happened.
Did you go to the authorities?
Immediately called the police.
Oh, you did?
Called the police. An assault and battery report was taken.
Okay.
Because the police officer really thought that was an assault and battery. But the problem was, then it was set on a desk.
Right. Well, they moved slowly because it wasn't, to them, a violent crime.
Exactly. At the time, it really wasn't a violent crime, and it was something that had always happened. It wasn't a big deal. So, and that's kind of what really motivated me, because I saw a lot of adults, it was not a big deal.
But did you go to the school?
I did go to the school. But
what did they say about it?
It was the end of the school year. It happened off school grounds. So there wasn't a lot that they could do. And then subsequently...
But did they get the message that was sort of endemic at the school, that there was something going on?
At that time, I don't think so. I think it was just one of those things that we all knew was happening, and we just looked the other way for years.
Well, typically, we did a show on kids who autistic, the autistic syndrome.
Yep.
Some of those kids who are mainstreamed are picked on because
Absolutely.
they have, they do things that bring attention to themselves. Obese children are picked
Absolutely.
on in the hallways, and it seems that we're more aware of it now than we were 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
Because it was always, I don't recall many children in my class, but the ones that spoke improperly, the ones that had speech impediments, people would imitate them. And that's a form of bullying, isn't it?
It is, because in some way you're still trying to intimidate another person, or you're trying to induce pain or consequence on that other person.
But there was nowhere to go. There was no one who would listen. If the child said to the teacher, they're picking on me, they're making fun of me, they're talking about my lack of clothing, and they're talking about this, and that, the teacher would say, okay, don't do that. That was it. That's as far as it went.
Don't do that, or, don't worry, they'll stop doing it, you'll get over it. Some of those things that adults would say. And it makes a difference, and that's one of the biggest things with research we hear from students today, is that adults aren't listening and adults are not reacting when they tell them these things.
Well, you're up at Michigan State. Yeah. I've had, 20 years of experience in higher education, and I see it go on, and it happens on campus.
It happens everywhere. I think when you really get to the core of bullying is really about power and control. That's the differentiation. And you see that in schools. We see it in business. Right. And we see it in institutions.
Well, you see it in business, but in business there's that discriminatory thing is always brought to. They're a little more concerned in business now. Yep. With human resources, and they say, hey, don't do what you've been doing, or
Absolutely.
you're going to lose your job. But tell me what you talk about when you go around the country and speak to groups of kids.
Really, I do want to raise that awareness level that this is something that we can't just pass off as something that always happens. It's getting very different. Bullying today is much different than it ever was in the past, especially with use of technology. Technology has had such a dramatic impact in how students use that technology to attack one another.
You're talking about internet and Facebook and things such as that.
Facebook, cell phones, all of those things. The students today are much, much savvier than we are with the technology.
Right.
Give them any piece of technology, they'll run circles around you. And I think schools across the nation did a very big disservice to stand back 5 years ago to say, as long as it happens on the internet or electronic means outside of school grounds, it's not our issue. But I've always seen it is your issue, because that's still a personal interaction between them that somewhere is going to come back into the school in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm listening to you talk about it, and I know when you talk K through 12, well, I took my child to kindergarten and said, here's my child.
Yep.
And he's going to be with you until he's 18. And she's going to be with you till she's 18.
Right.
Trusting the school to know what's best for the child. And trusting that they're not just going to teach a course, that they're going to teach people how to be people, real people. But there are no designated areas where they say, now you as a teacher are going to talk about social behavior. That doesn't happen in K through 12.
No, it doesn't, and we've lost some of that, and I think we have to really rebuild that into, because if all the schools will have a mission statement of they're building tomorrow's citizens, and it can't be just about test scores. They have to be well-rounded individuals who know how to interact in social settings, and that's a whole different area, but we have to develop that in our schools.
But not to digress.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a whole different
area. Well, we're concentrating more on science, the internet technology, engineering, and saying that's where the jobs are.
Right.
So let's get rid of humanities, let's get rid of philosophy, let's get rid of social studies. But within that area, that's where the teaching should be done. That's where you should be able to go to a counselor and say, listen, I'm having a difficult time. I'm not certain what the counselor can do, but we're going to, after we take a break, I want to talk about what Matt's Law is exactly, and if there's any punishments or penalties for violation of it. I want to talk to you about whether or not you talk to school administrators about what they should be doing. Do you do that?
I do.
And are they receptive to it?
They have become much more receptive than they were in the very beginning when I first started kind of talking about it. In 2003 is when I first started talking out.
How soon after Matt's death did you start being proactive about this?
It was probably in January of 2003 was the first time I kind of really spoke publicly about what we went through. And my focus has never really been about Matt's death, but Matt's death is driving this.
But it drove you.
It drove me to get other people to a much greater awareness of the problems we're having in society.
Well, we're going to take a break, just a few minutes, and we'll be back. Stay with us. We're on Due Process talking about Matt's Law. We're going to find out exactly what that is.
Legal referrals and more information on this and other related topics are available on our website at www.dueprocess.tv. There you'll find information on today's program, helpful hints to legal issues, support materials, and lawyer referrals. You can also stream previous episodes of Due Process.
Okay. We're back on Due Process talking about Matt's Law. We're going to find out exactly what it is. Matt was, 12, we just say 14 years old when he took his own life. Right. And I don't know how long it took you to recover from that, or if you're ever going to recover. But how long before you decided you needed legislation?
Well, when I started looking at early on, every school was supposed to have policies. The State Board of Ed in 2001 put out an issue to all schools that they should have a policy about bullying and harassment. Okay. It was a simple one-sheeter. And then as we were going through the legislative process, when I was asked to get on board with the law, we started trying to look at different schools and what were their policies. And a lot of schools had already jumped on a zero-tolerance bandwagon, that zero tolerance would cover everything and we were taking care of it. But they didn't have a lot of written policies. Mm-hmm. So what I really pushed for in trying to get Matt's Law passed was a requirement, and this is what it is now. It is a requirement that every school district, public school district, must have an anti-bullying, anti-harassment policy.
So that's Matt's Law.
That's Matt's Law, and then there are 9 criteria under Section 5 that the school should be meeting.
Can you tell me some of them?
Some of those are setting up reporting guidelines, setting up timelines that they will give reports back to their district about what they're doing. also advocating that they engage their community members and their parents, in the change process. Engage the students.
Now, these are requirements, right?
These are some requirements, and there's also suggestions. And the main requirement is that they do have some type of reporting. They have a policy that they are going to be addressing this particular issue. The one encouragement is training. We could not get that through as a requirement, which should have been, a number one.
Well, you're asking them to report, so obviously there has to be some kind of training that goes with it, built into it.
Right.
But is it as effective as you wanted it to be?
I think we're going to start to see the effectiveness right now. There was a newspaper report out of Flint that the superintendent and the administrator said it was a step in the right direction, because it allowed them to kind of come together. They can look at other districts. What are those policies? So for the very first time ever, and they also have to turn it into the state. That was another requirement. So for the first time, we can actually go to the State Board of Ed and look at everyone's policies across the state.
And check them and see
and
if
we
they're
can look
correct.
and say, hey, maybe this is maybe this is something you need to look at.
What is a group supporting this? Do you have a particular group?
I've been involved with a variety of groups throughout this entire process. I've worked with school administrators, educators, law enforcement.
It's not exclusive to Michigan.
No, not at all.
As a matter of fact, there's a book out.
We do have a book called Bullycide in America that we contributed our story to.
I think we have a picture of it, but it's here it is, Bullycide, and it was written by someone who had similar experience?
Well, it was actually, it's a story of 7 families across the United States. It's compiled by Brenda High, who started Bully Police USA, which is
Bully Police?
Is a grassroots organization of parents and educators who are really looking at bullying from a different angle.
These 7 issues, that there are 7 students you talked about, did they take their own lives?
They all took their own life. 2 of the stories are from right here in Michigan. And at the time that the law passed last December, I had already met 15 families who had lost students over the years.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. Let's go back in history.
Yeah.
We were having suicides of the teenagers, and no one knew the reason why.
Right. Suicide is the number 2 and number 3 cause of death among young people. And I think we're now finally getting to that point where when we lose a student, maybe law enforcement and others are looking a little closer as to what was going on in that individual's life. Bullying cannot be the only factor for a student to take their life. There are so many factors within a suicide. But it can be a very big piece, and that's what we're now starting to look at.
Well, I think in higher ed, they talk about, there were drugs or alcohol involved, and she fell out of a window and stuff like that. I'm not certain. I mean, it's hard to determine. But K through 12, I think it's a more fertile field where you can get some answers, because those kids are not involved as much in social interaction as the college students are. And
their social interaction really takes place within that environment. Most of it takes place there. And we've been tracking, with me belonging to Bully Police USA, I've gone to the national conferences in Washington, D.C. and connected with educators from across the country. We need to really look at that issue of suicide and its connection to bullying much deeper than we ever have before.
Have they done any statistical studies on the number of suicides and the amount of bullying that goes on?
Not as much, I think, as what some of the people want to look at. I mean, they have done great studies, and the CDC has, every few years, has reports on teen suicide across the United States, and it's broken down by state. It's broken down by region. I've also worked with the Michigan Suicide Prevention Agency here, and what we're trying to do. So if we know that it's the second and third leading cause, depending on age, that would be a target area that I'd like to see us work on for more prevention. And that's another piece about the law. It's not punishment. It's all about prevention.
Tell me about parents' intervention. What should a parent know? I mean, I know my grandson has a stomach ache, and he said it's real. He's not suffering from episodes of bullying.
Right.
But I need parents to know exactly what to look for. in order to prevent?
I think some of those things that we talked about earlier, watch your child. If they're changing their behavior, if they're sleeping later, if they're not, if they're being more lethargic, those things.
So let's assume that you detect some change in behavior, that you say, well, this is not my child. What do? Take him or her by the hand and get up to the school and say, hey, we have an issue?
I think what you might want to do is first talk with them if they have anything going on.
Right.
You may want to reach out to the school counselor. Are there any issues that have been going on at school? Check into that. Because I think our kids don't tell us everything. Matt didn't tell us everything, and we learned more about what happened. But I think talk with them first, talk with the school, like you suggested, actually take them in with the counselor and say, what is happening? And this is also where Matt's Law becomes a benefit to the parent, so they can actually take that in and say, by law, you are supposed to have a policy.
Right.
You're supposed to be
Here are
doing
the 9
these
criteria.
steps.
Yeah, right.
What are you doing? And actually, I always advocate parents, ask how you can help.
Right.
Not how you can help just your child. How can you really help every child in that school? Because if we really talk to a counselor or teacher about helping the bully as well as the victim and get them to understand that behavior is negative behavior, we can start to build a better climate within the school.
In your son's case, it seems that he wouldn't be a candidate for bullying. It would be somebody who had a physical defect, as I said before, speech impediment, somebody who was obese, someone who was thin, or this and that. You had normal son.
No, and I think that's where things have changed so dramatically, because it used to be those that kind of stood out were targeted.
Right.
Now, today, it can be someone who is very popular being targeted by someone who wants to be popular. It's very, very different dynamic today.
Yeah, well, I've seen some of the programs that are now designed to get a demographic of kids who are 18 to 49 or something like that, 25, 49. And they're using Facebook, and they're sending out these mass mailings, so to speak, and saying so-and-so did something last night. Well, you can't stop it. It's there. I mean, you can stop it, but you can't stop the transmission of this.
Well, and that's where it's different today, because where it used to be one-on-one, if you and I had a problem with somebody, it was one-to-one. Today it can be 100-to-1, it can be 1,000-to-1 in a matter of minutes. But we can't also discount the technology as being the only problem, because I've actually talked at some schools where school students have started their own positive Facebooks and positive Twitter accounts. And they send that out to the class and say, your job is to give somebody positive comments on Twitter. And a student actually just started this in Minnesota on his own.
How does it work?
It's just, he started posting this. He started, it was called Osseo Nice for his school. He started posting anonymously about nice things about students, about teachers, about events, and everybody else started chiming in. And it wasn't until about 3 months later that he finally gave it up that he's the person who started it. And now that's been replicated in different cities. So students do have a power, and that's my job. I want to empower students to become the change agents.
So it becomes a positive thing.
Becomes a positive.
Negative thing. When you were back in school, all those many years ago, K through 12, weren't there kids who were selectively bullied?
Oh, absolutely.
But we didn't think about it we didn't label it as bullying. You say, well, you're picking on so-and-so.
Yeah, you're picking on somebody. And probably if you can say, yes, I knew who those people were, and probably sometimes I was the victim, and then also I was probably the bully. We cross that line back and forth because it's a narrow line between being a bully and a victim. And a lot of times what we see today is we see a lot of victims resorting to bullying behavior because they're getting pushed around. So guess what? I'm going to return it to somebody else.
Right.
So it's a vicious cycle.
Well, I'm trying to understand that you didn't have an idea that Matt was suffering as a result of that one incident.
Right.
I mean, you had no way of knowing that he had to end it that way.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we had talked with him at length about what he wanted to do, how it made him feel. And we have this hole that we will never be able to fill of why. So we have to kind of play detective and put all the pieces together, and everything kind of goes right back to that incident that really kind of caused, a downfall. And knowing us as his parents, knowing his personality, how much this really affected him.
But he was open and talked to you, and
yeah, he was very open. I mean, we did a lot together. So we did a lot of things together.
Well, Kevin, good luck in your crusade. I just think that it's important for us to know that there are resources available. There's a law in Michigan, and the schools, the pushback has to go to the schools.
Yep.
Those are the ones responsible.
And parents have to get involved and involve the students as much as possible.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
Don't just reject convention. Drown it out. Introducing the all-new 2013 Lexus LS F Sport, an entirely new pursuit.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Live, local, and committed to Michigan's future. News Radio 950, WWJ.